Have you ever wondered where sin came from? How sin came into the world? And do you even know what sin is? Well, sin is basic disobeying God, basically disobedience to God. And whenever God created Adam and Eve, they were perfect. Now remember, God cannot sin. Christ cannot sin. He never did sin. He doesn't even know how to sin. And when God made Adam and Eve in His own image, they could not sin. But God placed a tree right in the middle of the garden, and God said, do not touch the fruit from that tree. We don't know what type of fruit it was or what type of tree. That's not important. God was testing Adam and Eve to see if they would disobey Him or obey Him. And then the devil comes along. Remember, the devil has been cast out of heaven. He's an enemy to God, and he hates God, and he wants to break off the link between God and man, the connection. And he knew if he can get Adam and Eve to disobey God by taking the fruit. So he comes along subtly, disguised as a serpent, and he says to Eve, why are you not taking from the fruit from that tree in the middle of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And Eve said, if we take from that tree, God says we will die. We will surely die. And the devil said, that's not true. If you take from that tree, you'll live forever, and you become wise just like God. That's a lie, wasn't it? And Eve thought, really? Can I become wise like God? And she looks at the fruit, and she stretches forth, and she takes the fruit. Some people think it was an apple, or an orange, or a banana. The type of fruit is not important. The fact she took that fruit, she immediately disobeyed God. Now, she was holding the fruit, but she bit into the fruit, and that's what made all the difference. She opened the fruit, and she bit into it. Just like that. And the moment she done that, sin came into the world. As by one man, sin entered the world. And there was Adam. He could have stopped her, but he didn't. Eve disobeyed God. And then God came in the garden and said, Adam, Eve, where are you? And suddenly they were afraid, and they went and they hid themselves. So whenever God called Adam and Eve in the garden, they hid themselves because they realized they were naked and they were afraid. See, before they never realized this or noticed because they were clothed in God's perfection. But now that sin had come into the world, they realized they had disobeyed God, and they tried to hide from God. So God called, Adam and Eve, where are you? And God says, are you hiding from me? Did you take from that tree? And whenever they admitted their guilt, their wrong before God, God said, you realize you brought death upon yourselves. And He said to Adam, from now on you're going to have to work, and you're going to have to sweat. And Eve, every time a woman gives birth to a child, there's going to be pain. And the whole ground is no longer perfect. There's going to be thorns and thistles and briars. And there's going to be evidence of sin in the whole world. And the worst thing of all, Adam and Eve were now separated from God. And everyone born into this world, me and you and everyone else, is born with what is called original sin, separated from God. That's why God so loved the world, He sent His only begotten Son, His perfect Son, Jesus, to be born into this world, to live and to die, to take away our sin, that we can be brought back to God. And God had to put them out of the garden, because the garden was perfect. It represented the presence of God, and God took them to the gate, and He put them out of the garden forever. So God put Adam and Eve out of the garden. The garden represented perfection in the presence of God. And now, because of their sin, their disobedience to God, which all of us automatically inherit, the moment a baby is born into this world, while it is the most beautiful of all of God's creations, that little child inherits automatically original sin. And in the garden, God put Adam and Eve out through the garden, and they had to be put out through the garden gate. And God shut the gate. But worse than this, God put two angels on the side of the gate. And if they tried to come back in, or anyone tried to come back into the presence of God their own way, that they had flaming swords and they could be killed on the spot. That was teaching us that we cannot come back into God's presence our own way. And no one can go to heaven their own way. There's only one way to heaven, and that's through God's Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, because he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto God the Father but by me.